a very, very popular topic that many people have sent in a question about has been FTR. Apparently, they did an interview this past week where they revealed that there was considerable locker room heat, and I guess in some cases hotel heat, from the rest of the roster in AEW after they appeared on the Jim Cornette Experience. What are your thoughts on the fact that so many people in AEW, with the exception of management, were upset with them appearing on the Experience?
This is the ultimate example of Dutch Mantel's famous prophecy of 15 years ago. I liked the business better when the marks were out front. Because now the biggest marks, the biggest goofs, the biggest imbeciles are not the fans. They're the people in the locker room. They're the fucking wrestlers. Think about this. Every single one of those fucking morons and idiots in that locker room is sitting next to, palling around with, or has no problem with somebody that has basically gone out and not only exposed the business on national television, worldwide internet, or whatever, but made a mockery of it. You've got guys that have wrestled blow-up dolls and 9-year-old girls in public. You have people that have taken part in obviously phony bullshit Saturday Night Live sketches, football field fuckery, people coming out of ice machines having transported there from different dimensions. Stuff that makes Eddie Mansfield look like Toots Mondt. And that anybody involved in the wrestling industry until 10 years ago would have gotten in a physical altercation with that person for doing that in front of fans in a public forum. And they're all fucking friends. But for one of their new talent acquisitions to go on a podcast that between podcast and YouTube views has pretty much the same number of listeners as their fucking Wednesday night television program on the TNT network, to promote themselves and the fact that they're coming to this new company and they're going to kick some ass, whether they were able to follow through with it or not. At the time, they were still optimistic, and they're just going to kick everybody's ass, and they get themselves over and they are talked of as the greatest team in the world, which would benefit that joke of a promotion, because let's face it, most of my audience has functioning brain cells and likes pro wrestling, which means they spit and wipe boogers on the AEW product and talent roster. But they don't have any problem with people shitting on the business, making mockery of the business, making the business look stupid and laughing about it in public. They're palling around with those guys. But somebody that tells the truth about those fucking goof wrestlers and makes fun of them and their attempts to somehow get over, well, that person is despicable, and this new talent shouldn't be allowed to fucking promote our little weak-ass pissant of a company on his podcast with a reach of 500,000 or 1 million people a fucking week. So there you go. It's official now. The smarter people are in the seats and the marks are in the locker room.
Especially that locker room.
Especially that locker room.
Well,
you know what? I'm just wondering what they do in that locker room. Because the last time I saw the Young Bucks in a fucking locker room, and we've talked about this, was that Global Force Wrestling show where Jeff Jarrett was apparently stuck and had to book them. They had no option. No other tag team could fill that spot. But anyway, when I walk in, there's the Bucks and there's like 12 or 14 other guys, and they're sitting on couches. It was a nice minor league baseball stadium locker room. They're sitting on couches. They're sitting in the little cubby holes that replace lockers now in these new stadiums. They're laying on the floor with their heads on their bags, and every single one of them looking at their phone, texting on their phone, looking at some video on their phone. One guy was texting another guy on the other side of the room. Nobody speaking out loud. Nobody telling stories. Nobody talking about the trip they had last night. Nobody playing any ribs. Nobody talking about pussy. In that locker room, that would be a fucking foreign concept. But anyway, that's when I fucking, to break the tension as I was walking through, said, "Hey, Bucks, We got the only angle of the business people believe. And walked right on, hey, Jim, with their personalities. And that was my big, session where I begged them to work with them because, we could make all this money together. But these guys are just fucking bland. I don't know whether it's the generation or whether it's just the generation that wants to get in the wrestling business now. But just a simpering, bland, boring, penny-wasted group of individuals, not a wrestling locker room. Where was I going with that?
I have no idea.
Well, was there a question that I've yet to answer?
I think you somewhat answered that question.
Oh, no, I know what I was going to say. You know what they were doing? They were on their phones in the locker room. They're just sitting there quietly. They ought to at least use their locker room time for good. If they're not going to sit and ask veterans how to do things, if they're not going to talk about pussy, if they're not going to play any ribs, if they're not going to have friendly shoots on the floor, whatever the fuck, then at least they could groom themselves properly. And do you know that our friends at Manscaped have now got everything covered?